It was the night of the 6th day of summer when the rider arrived. It was often said, "Dark wings, dark words." However, a messenger traveling on horseback was always a far worse omen than a raven, for it meant that the message was so perilous it could not be trusted to the bird. Now even the rider's horse was black. Black horse, even blacker words. House Bolton was not a man easily caught off guard. Yet even for him, this message was a shock. The messenger had come from Winterfell. The message was that the armies of the north had been summoned, and the march to south would begin before the half moon. The call to arms itself did not surprise Roose. When word had arrived from the south that Eddard Stark had been taken prisoner as a traitor in King's Landing, House Bolton had immediately begun gathering his forces at the Dreadfort. He knew conflict was inevitable. What was shocking about the midnight message was what had now happened in the south. The boy king, Joffrey Baratheon, had executed Eddard Stark. It was not Stark's death that unsettled Roose, but rather the sheer unpredictability of the situation. Joffrey Baratheon was clearly a mad dog, one whose actions could neither be guessed nor controlled. The conflict between the Starks and the Lannisters would no longer be settled by a few small skirmishes alone. This was now a war to the death against House Lannister. The very next morning, things began to move at the Dreadfort. Lord Bolton ordered the mobilization to commence. His trusted man, Locke, was assigned to lead the scouting force, and well, the interrogation unit. Locke was one of the few who still believed in the old saying, "A naked man has few secrets, a flayed man none." When fighting for life and death, one could not afford to shy away from certain methods, even if the sanctimonious Robb Stark failed to understand that. Steelshanks Walton was appointed to command Bolton's infantry, while Roose Bolton himself would lead the cavalry. Walton was not a particularly clever man, nor a particularly skilled swordsman, nor even a particularly talented tactician. But no one was more loyal than Steelshanks Walton. Roose Bolton's word was his law. That was why Roose trusted this bull-like brute more than any other man in the entire Dreadfort. And when it came to the men Roose did not trust, well, the one left to govern the Dreadfort was his bastard son, Ramsay Snow. Of all the people in the castle, Ramsay was the one Roose trusted the least. Ramsay did not even attempt to behave as the heir of House Bolton was expected to. He could barely read. When the castle meisters tried to teach him, the twisted and sadistic bastard's mind constantly wandered elsewhere, far away in the northern woods, alongside Myranda, the kennel master's daughter. Myranda and Ramsay were a dangerous and destructive pair. People whispered about what the two of them did in the forests and meadows surrounding the castle, though no one knew for certain if the stories were mere old wives' tales or held some dreadful truth. These rumors had reached his father's ears as well. Yet he had no choice but to leave a strong garrison under Ramsay's command to defend the Dreadfort. Skirmishes between the Manderleys and the Boltons had flared up before, and now that Eddard Stark's charisma was no longer keeping the peace, there was a real risk that fights would break out in the north, even as the main forces marched south. Roose knew that leaving an army in his bastard's hands was a gamble, but now, at last, the boy would have to prove that he was truly a Bolton and not just a mad bastard dog. On the night of the 12th day of summer, Roose Bolton ordered his army to march. The cavalry led the way, followed by infantry and archers. torches were lit, and the fire serpent born from House Bolton's dark-clad men began slithering across the northern valleys, winding its way southwest toward Winterfell, where the northern host would gather. Roose favored night marches, especially in summer. The air was cool, and under the cover of darkness, prying eyes could not easily count the number of men in his ranks. He took 2/3 of his forces with him. 1/3 remained behind under the Bastard's command at the Dreadfort. The night before, Roose had received a raven from Robb Stark. The message declared that House Bolton would be second in command, answering only to Robb himself. After all, House Bolton was the second greatest house in the north. Rumors spoke of battle already raging in the Riverlands, of the mountain setting the lands ablaze. Harrenhal had fallen into Lannister hands. Roose knew well that the sooner they reached the south, the better their chances. If they moved swiftly, they might be able to win the Riverlords to their cause. And beyond that, marching before the autumn rains turned the roads into a sea of mud would make all the difference. Roose sent Locke and 20 scouts ahead of the main force, not because there was any real threat between the Dreadfort and Winterfell that could endanger an entire army, but because a small, swift cavalry unit had the advantage of catching bandits preying on the realm's chaos by surprise. The roads and forests of the north had become dangerous places for common folk. Locke's orders were to bypass Winterfell and ride straight to Moat Cailleen. From there, he was to conduct scouting missions south of the Neck until the main host arrived. On their very first night, Locke and his scouts, moving swiftly, caught a group of 25 bandits just south of Pine Straw. The outlaws had been moving through the forest and were crossing an open meadow when Locke's riders spotted them in the dim summer night. Without hesitation, they charged. The skirmish was brief. Locke's men slaughtered the bandits without suffering a single loss. However, the tracks in the dirt told Locke there had been more than 20 bandits. So, the pursuit began. A few hours later, west of a nearby river, they caught up with the remaining 15. Once again, the fight was swift. Once again, Locke's men won without casualties. And once again, no prisoners were taken.